Well, good morning, everybody. I'm going to start you off today with a couple of slides from the presentations I've been giving this summer and in this early fall. And we're going to start off in South America because today is September 15th, meaning that planting can start in South America. So I got two things I want to share with you before we dig into this forecast. Over there on the right, that would be a month-by-month accumulation of precipitation right in here in the central part of Brazil. So we're going to focus in on this area. And this is what we think about. They have a winter dry season, which starts in May and lasts to about August. And what's going on right now is that there is this anticipation of the start of the monsoon. They, most years are allowed to start planting soybeans on September the 15th. And the general idea here is to start planting as fast as possible. And they want to do that so that they can harvest that crop as soon as maybe the early December or January, and at the latest early February. And what happens is following the harvesters, they will come in with the planters and put the safrinha corn in right after it. So it's an amazing thing. It's not something I see in Illinois a lot because we don't do much double cropping in Illinois where I live, but you can just imagine that you have a whole bunch of combine harvesters rolling through, and then following them are the planters just putting the new crop in. About 75% of their total corn crop is a safrinha or second season crop. Safrinha means second or smaller. That's generally the way that it's interpreted. Now, the reason why we're concerned about this is because the pace at which planting happens dictates the timing of harvest. And the reason they have to get harvest done fast is because the monsoon begins to fade at the end of April. All right. Now, this is how this monsoon works. Look up here. I'm going to draw some very thin lines. The monsoonal flow has to originate here. It's got to come out of the very moist air that is north of the Amazon, then rolls over the Amazon, picking up better moisture, and then curls right around and exits in eastern Brazil. Now, in Argentina, their weather systems are primarily driven by fronts. So their cold fronts come up from the south. And this is just the general, very general circulation of South America during a growing season. But it's normal for them to get between 75 and 100 millimeters of rain a week. That's 3 to 4 inches of rain a week in the heart of their season, December, January, February, right here. Now, I always get asked, and I love to show this next map in every presentation I give, but I always get asked how big of a growing area they have in South America. So here is just another view of it using one of my favorite websites called The True Size Of. You can actually overlay states. So I just threw a bunch on there just to kind of give you some perspective as to how large their growing area is in South America. So we just think about this, and we think about the areas in which they grow. And so the main competing crops with some of the big commodity crops you grow in the United States, corn and soybeans. These are just some maps from the USDA. Their biggest producing state is Mato Grosso. So you're probably going to hear me say Mato Grosso a lot over the coming weeks, because we're going to talk about that area. I know I've shared this with some of you, but a year ago, or not a year ago, but back in 2020, when we were kind of in the middle of the pandemic and doing a lot of work from home, I talked daily about the forecast happening in South America, and I kept mentioning Mato Grosso. Now, my wife is a nurse, and she's an incredible nurse, but she doesn't study geography and certainly doesn't study weather, which for me is a great thing. We actually have something to talk about then. But she kept asking me she asked me one day, she goes, "Eric, what is a Mato Grosso? You say it all the time." And I said, well, Mato Grosso is just the name of this big Brazilian state. It's right here. And there's another one called Mato Grosso do Sul, which means of the south. So between these two here, I mean, they arguably, that's 30 to 40% of the crop in South America. And she's like, oh, now remember, this middle of pandemic, she's like, I think I'm going to have a drinking game. Every time you say Mato Grosso, I'm going to take a drink. And I'm like, you're going to be drunk by like 9 a.m. because I have to talk about it a lot during their growing season. Now, she doesn't drink, but it's like coffee. I don't know. She'd be high on caffeine. So anyway, I get into all of this because today's September 15th, and just kind of share a personal story about this. So let me show you what's going on right now. All right. This map is the problem map, because this is a map looking back at the beginning of September, the first 12 days of September here. And this is the issue. There's a large area of high pressure here. Now, in the southern hemisphere, the flow goes around a high pressure center in a counterclockwise direction. And what this has done is this has taken flow out and around, and it's coming into Brazil from this direction. It needs to come in from this direction in order for the monsoon to get going. But we have had a lot of anomalously low pressure lined up here, which is what's caused all the massive flooding coming out of Paraguay, clipping parts of northern Argentina, but hammering Rio Grande do Sul and Uruguay. And so this is what's going on right now. There's two anomalously high pressure in this area. And it looks like this today. This is the one we're looking at. Let's get that off of there, right here. See that big area of high pressure? So can you see the flow? It's too weak. It's not bringing monsoonal moisture into Brazil's main growing area, and it's certainly not north shifted enough to start to draw in moisture from this direction. So this is the problem right now in their forecast. And the question is, how long does it last? Because as you add up total precipitation here, let's blow that up one more time. There we go. Notice we're not looking at much at all. And just speaking with numerous Brazilian growers, the general consensus is they're waiting on 50 millimeters of rain. They need about 2 inches of rain, which is getting up into this part of my color bar to hit this whole broad area before there's enough moisture in the ground such that when they plant, the seed has a chance at germinating. And they don't want to do it where they plant on the first rain because they needed to have more consistent rains just because of different soil types in this part of the world compared to what maybe the soil types are where we grow soybeans in the United States. So we don't have a fast start. And what I mean by that is we don't have the setup in the atmosphere for them to just aggressively plant today. So there's going to be patience exercised here by these very wise Brazilian growers for when the moisture does come in. Now, some of the long-range models are not suggesting that this is going to be right away. You know, if we look at the fluctuations in what we call velocity potential, so this is where we look at like the MJO position, things like that. Here's today, the 15th. I show you these a lot. This is going to the 25th, or not 25th, excuse me, the 29th. And what we notice is that during that time, so these colors are sitting on top geographically here. This is a lot of suppression in the atmosphere, suppressing motion. So the lid's off over the Indian Ocean where the blue-greens are, but not here. And it's just the wrong setup. It's just not there yet to allow them to rapidly start planting. And the longer range models are really, I'll be honest with you, they're kind of stuck on persistence, but they're not giving up on it. So you notice there's overall a drier signal north and wetter signal south as we kind of progress forward. Now, Argentina is recovering from a multi-year drought, and to see a drier signal in Argentina is not good either. And it's continuing to look wet in between southern Brazil, Uruguay, parts of Paraguay. And all right, so this, I'll just be honest, this forecast I'm showing you here, the European model, is really just taking what's going on right now and just not allowing much change to it. But there's reasons that it's doing that. There right now isn't a strong signal for change, and with the developing El Nino and the way it kind of pushes and shoves the MJO around, that maybe this is what ends up happening. I would say that the probability of having a super fast start to Brazil's growing season is low, and if they do aggressively plant, there might be quite a bit of replanted acres due to lack of good conditions for germination. Now, there's still going to be a crop coming out of Brazil. Don't for a second think that this is going to be, the end-all factor. And some of the longer-range models, even though they suggest throughout September, getting into October, a weaker monsoon. Remember that south of this line right in through here is probably 55 to 60% of Brazil's soybean and corn crop. And so we're just mainly focusing on the northern areas, which we do run the risk of being drier. But through October into November, December, there's the chance that we have less than normal precipitation. As I stated earlier, less than normal only matters if it's much, much less than normal, because they typically have an abundance of precipitation here. So all we're stating at this point is the start, it's just not there yet. They may be spinning their wheels a little bit before they actually get out and start aggressively planting. And by the way, the European model goes wet in January. Now, remember my diagram at the very beginning. By the time we get out there late in the season, this is March, there is concern that the monsoon slows down early here. And we talked about that in the last couple of weeks, so I just want to bring that back up again as something to kind of keep a close eye on. So that's what I got going for you right now out of South America. Okay, across North America, I just want to animate for you what we're seeing in terms of total accumulated precipitation. This is from today's 0Z run on the European model. Now, we're going to talk about Lee in a second, but there is a low here that's got a front drape to the south, and there's still a stalled out frontal boundary down here that's going to add some more rain to the southern plains. This is going to come through and provide very, little in the way of rainfall overall. We're not looking at heavy rain coming through the Midwest, which is still very dry. And as we play this forward, we're then going to watch next week. Now, keep your eye. I know you're kind of keeping an eye on Lee, but I want you to keep your eye on the west. You see, the operational runs are, look at that. Look over Oregon, Idaho, Northern California, and Nevada. Next week, this is next week, we're digging in a pretty interesting feature into there that I want to watch carefully. If that low does show up kind of like it's suggested here next Thursday, Friday, That's a deep low in the west. It's going to kick off a big system in the central United States. And if I just take it out 10 days, all the way till the following Sunday, the 24th, we see that there is a lot of action happening in the west. And then you can see this corridor in through here opening up to quite a bit of activity. Now, before we get there, it's going to be relatively dry in this area, other than the weekend chances of some moisture. But just kind of point that out. Now, the East Coast, we have scattered storms, but it's been very wet across the East Coast as of late. And so, we'll just kind of weigh this against it. Down south, no tropical activity coming out of the Atlantic. Not out of the Atlantic, out of the Gulf of Mexico being seen just yet. So here's our latest update on Lee, just so you know. The newest updates are continuing to take this farther and farther to the east. You now see that we're probably projecting landfall somewhere between New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, but there is still tropical storm warnings out for the coast from parts of Massachusetts all the way through Maine. So we'll watch for this very carefully. Now, Lee has already weakened down to wind speeds of 85 miles an hour. That's right here in its kind of central core where those hurricane strength winds are, but it's expected to be a tropical storm by the time it gets here. Now, I don't know. I'm going to have to go back and look this up, but I feel like I've been talking about Lee for probably 13 days. So this has been a bit of an exhausting system to keep an eye on. But let's keep going. This is the newest ensemble tracks, pretty tight spacing, suggesting where the center of Lee is going to go. And if we kind of look at some of the hazards here, this is accumulated winds, so not much change, I would say. A lot of 40 to 50 mile an hour gusts in Maine, parts of New Hampshire. Strongest winds will likely be out there in Cape Cod, as we discussed. Some stronger winds along the shore here. I saw some reports of some pretty epic surfing along the East Coast, and I could believe it, given that the waves out there are 10 to 15 feet in places. I know you don't get out surfing this far, but along the shore, we got some pretty big waves out there. And we expect them to get quite large here as we approach, Saturday morning here from Cape Cod up to like Bar Harbor. This area is going to see some very, very large wave action. So that's the latest we've gotten. I did kind of find it interesting. One of my new favorite sites that was given to me by my good friend Ken Dahlmeyer, just looking at marine traffic. You can kind of see there's a big hole, right here where Lee currently is. And all the ships, rightfully so, are kind of staying out of the way of it. So interesting to see that. Okay. Next thing I want to do is just give you some perspective on the system following it. It's called 97L. It's got a 90% chance of developing. Most models are developing this into a system. We still have Margo out there spinning around. And here we are, the 15th. We could call this the peak of the hurricane season. So we're about to begin the second half. And just looking right now at ensemble probabilities. This is saying, what's the chance of getting a tropical depression? Whatever this becomes, it would get the name Nigel, would stay out here to open ocean. At least that's the latest evidence. So, our East Coast and our Gulf Coast over the next 10 days during the peak of the hurricane season are not seeing a lot of action. We talked about yesterday what were some of the reasons for the Gulf being so inactive. All right, so let's transition back into a kind of a forecast for the rest of the U.S. And I'm going to give you this map first because I was thinking, I saw some more videos of flooding coming out of Colorado yesterday, and it's just a map that shows you year to date. So this starts on January 1 and shows you year to date precipitation ranks by climate district. And after, 4 years of drought, we saw so much of the high in Western Plains showing up now this section of Colorado with its wettest year on record. It's right now we're pursuing the wettest on record. We saw exceptional drought develop in summer down south, and this map does not capture that because of the heavy rains we saw back in April and early May in the Panhandle. Of course, California had an incredible January, a miracle March, and then in summer it had Hillary, and then we had the deep trough that was one that hit the Burning Man festival out here. We watched pretty sizable droughts develop in the beginning of the season. That would be May to June. Then a bunch of rain came through a lot of the Midwest. Not all of it, but a lot of it. And then we saw late season drought develop here as well, which has taken the Mississippi River down as low as it is. We've watched all year as parts of the Mid-Atlantic had struggled with drought, but not so much in the Southeast. And in the Northeast, a lot of this comes from the incredible flooding that happened back in summer in this area, just with the stalled out frontal boundary, just absolutely wrecking some of this area back. What was that? That would have been in late July. So just a great map to get some perspective on. Where are we going? Well, the rainfall over the last 72 hours is shown here. And some excellent rain again starts to hit some of the driest spots in the country down here in Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico. And it's not perfect coverage, but it's rain. There's been some rain down there in our winter wheat belt. We got to keep an eye on that because today we do have the risk of strong storms in West Texas getting into New Mexico. But there is a front sitting here. In fact, you can see it in the wind field right there. That also has the chance for, excuse me, some stronger storms as well. So what I'm going to be keeping an eye on, we have a low sneaking through here. This is Lee. We know Lee's going to go north. There's Margo. And here's this next system we're going to watch. This is what I'm most interested in, though, right now. And because the momentum being picked up here, coming out or south of the Aleutian Islands into the Gulf of Alaska, is what is eventually going to be used to drop some much deeper troughs into the western United States. And I want to talk about those because those troughs are going to set us up for what is looking to be a very active midsection of the country next week and in the west. So here we go. This is what I'm keeping an eye on. As we play through the weekend, the jet stream is going to be quite favorable for overall pretty dry conditions across a big section of the country. The cooler weather is going to exit east here, and we're going to watch Lee get absorbed into the flow. All right, after we get past Monday and Tuesday of next week, there's a piece of our subtropical branch. It is split away from the polar branch. What ends up happening here by Tuesday into Wednesday is that they kind of come together. And the reason for this is because the newest model runs continue to deepen the trough of low pressure by next Thursday that's going to come in here. So you already know the flow comes around these like this in the northern hemisphere, but that's going to get an extra kick on the south side from this piece of the subtropical jet. What I'm talking about here is kind of the normal fall, winter, and spring jet stream dynamics. And that, if it does occur, it's going to be a little slower than originally forecast, but by the end of next week, this has the potential for kicking off a sizable mid-latitude, I'll call it a fall storm system, in the midsection of the country with a lot of cold air on the backside of it, which means snow in the Rocky Mountains out of this. So with that as the setup, it's now beginning to get picked up by the 7-day forecast. So this is the newest update from the WPC. So what do we have right now? We have the weak frontal boundary here that's sliding through the Midwest. That's the one that's going to happen this weekend. Better chances of rain over the Appalachian Mountains. A stalled out frontal boundary giving us wet conditions in Florida. The tail end of it is sitting here. But what you see in through this area, all of this is starting about a week from now, next Thursday and Friday, as this new system begins to emerge. And I want to show it to you on the European model run. So this is today. We're just playing through later today. We're going to watch the stronger storms down here, scattered storms in parts of the southeast, low moving into Ontario, and there's the front by tonight. What we're going to see is as we go into the early morning hours, that should be about the time Lee is approaching Nova Scotia, approaching New Brunswick, getting close to Maine. Expect it to go right in through there. And by midday Saturday, there's a frontal boundary here and some showers. It connects up to Ontario. Again, more scattered showers down in parts of the southeast. So then we played into Sunday, and as I said, the weekend, this is the late weekend, by Monday morning, we're in the middle, right? One system's leaving, the next ones are coming in. But watch over here, ready? We'll play this kind of quickly, Monday into Tuesday. Not a whole lot going on. We get out there into Wednesday and Thursday. Now look, this is where this next system is beginning to gather its strength. So what's happened here is there's a trough that's curled in. The subtropical jet's about to meet up with it. So the action's going to start here and eject there. Ready? So this is next Wednesday, getting into Thursday and Friday. And you start to see this all coming together there, right? So that's Wednesday through Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So we're going to watch the midsection of the country see its first significant system rolling through. And you see a little blue in here. I just want to show you something. The latest European model run suggests that over the next 10 days, we're going to be talking about some snow at very high elevation, but some early season snow coming through here. Now, what about the probabilities? Well, over the next 5 days, this map shows the best chance of getting an inch. So you can kind of highlight those main areas we just discussed. But as I add in the 5 days following that, so this is day 5 through 10, we now start to see much better chances of getting that system rolling through. Again, it's late next week into next weekend coming into this area. Now, it's going to change a lot in its position, strength, and timing because it's too far out for us to be accurate on. That's why I show you the ensembles to give you this idea that there's a better chance that this system will be pulling through the midsection of the country. It's even showing up just kind of in all three models for week 2. So this would be the new CPC forecast. This is the new European, and this is new GFS. You see all three of them out there in week 2 are showing a similar setup for what's coming through the midsection of the country. Now that flow, while it's going to dip some cold air west, is one that's going to bring in a lot of warm air east. And that's why we see right now, if there's a risk of frost, it's going to be in our mountains where the snow chances are coming. But we don't have it here across the eastern United States anymore. So 2 days, we had much colder air in the upper Midwest, but now we're kind of building ourselves back into some warm conditions. So now you already see today's highs, very cool across the Front Range, cool south, but warm up happening west first. Another little push of warmth coming through the Midwest today, tomorrow. Watch the heat come through Montana, out of the Northwest. That's going to move on Monday, Tuesday, right across the central U.S., the upper Midwest, the Northern Plains. So this is the day where I don't have a lot going on. And then we go forward, look at the cool down west. That's that trough. The warm up east, that's the setup, right? So remember, the jet stream always goes south of that and runs up over this, and that's the flow. We like that. That's a flow that brings in weather. So longer range. Next 5 days look like this. Day 5 through 10 shifts. Look at that. They're just going to replace the west with the east. And that's why I said yesterday, it's like the atmosphere's got to, this is what we see when it's open and moving. Steady fiber in the diet. Okay, and this gets us out there beyond that. Now, I'll be honest, from day 10 to day 15, the models don't show much variation. They're trying to keep that same pattern in configuration. So we'll talk on Monday if there's any shift out here this long as to what could be going on in the pattern. All right, so I got one last thing I want to share with you, and that is just a quick kind of longer range update. I think the top thing to be watching from now through winter, again, is the subtropical jet. That will be the mainstay of the activity, determining the moisture across the south. But I just want to make a point here. We did get today the new Farmer's Almanac forecast. And I'm going to tell you something. I've been doing these weather forecast videos for 10 years. I don't think I've ever shown it in any of my forecast videos. I don't often use it. Actually, let me rephrase that. I've never used it as a forecast metric. But man, they're going after it. I mean, I love this. I hope it happens. I don't have any confidence in it happening, but I hope it does. And I only hope it does for one reason, and that is I want to see this reduced. And we right now, look at the newest drought monitor. We have such a large section of the United States that is in drought. It's a unique configuration of drought. It's certainly different from the last almost 10 years where drought has just been anchored west. But it's something I want eliminated. That's me forecasting with my heart, not my head. I want to see this change. I believe, and based off of evidence I've got, that El Nino is going to help spur along this subtropical jet. So while you see this Farmer's Almanac forecast and it looks the way it does, just remember that there's two things about winter that I always think about, right? Winter, when we summarize it after 3 months, is much different than the way people actually remember it. You often remember winters based off of the big events. So in other words, you could have a really mild East Coast winter with nothing going on, but then one big snowstorm in February, and you'll think back on the winter of 23-24 as being terrible because of that one event. That's just how we all do. But the overall thing here is that the second thing is I just think about what it would take to bust a drought out, and it's great to see that we've got El Nino going. Now, I'll make one caveat against this. Not caveat, but one argument against it and one argument for it. Whenever we have an El Nino, it is very difficult to keep really cold air in place across the northern interior of the United States. That's just history, because you end up splitting the jet and you have the subtropical coming in. You see, to keep the northern part of the United States so cold, you've got to just anchor cold air in place here and get the jet to come in south of it. So I just showed you it's coming in like this. That's the wrong way. So we just know that during El Ninos that doesn't typically happen. But I told you I had two ideas here. If the Farmer's Almanac has a hint, it may be in the fact that there's so much warm water here, warm water there, and we don't have the sea ice coverage in the very north of, up here in the Arctic that we typically get. And there's a whole lot of warm water in the Atlantic. Now just imagine if you displace warm water and then warm air here and here, the atmosphere has to go on a rebound, and it could start drawing a lot of that into the central U.S. So while I don't often rely on this, let me rephrase that, I never rely on this, I could see some merit to it that I think is worth just talking about. I now openly welcome all the criticism and the laughs, but we're just looking at something here on a Friday morning, trying to make some sense of it. So there you go, just something fun to have a look at here. And I'm going to take a break this weekend, but I will be watching that long-range evolution in the forecast. We should get the new CPC updates next week, which I'm excited to share with you. Until then, though, have a good one. Thank you.